The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing. Hi, everyone. Today, we're talking to artist and writer Carrie Knowles about her approach to visual arts. This is part 3 of our interviews with Carrie. Please check out episodes 211 and 212 for my previous discussions with her about writing fiction and nonfiction, respectively. Carrie Knowles is a prolific award-winning author and arts advocate. Along with her 9 books, she has published short stories, newspaper, and magazine articles and received numerous awards for her writing. In addition to being a writer, she is also a visual artist. In 2017, she was invited to be one of the 7 international artists for a special exhibition in Brisbane, Australia. The 7 of them were all artists who worked in more than one genre. The theme of the show was the inevitable past. They were tasked with the job of responding to the theme by bringing together their artwork with their other creative voices. In thinking about what was inevitable about her own past, Carrie began writing about her father's mother who died during his birth, leaving many unanswered questions as to who she was and where she was going when she arrived at the Door of Hope, a home for unwed mothers in Macon, Georgia, badly beaten, unconscious, and very pregnant. Here's what the curator of the show wrote about Carrie's work. It has been asked, is Carrie an author who creates visual arts or an artist who writes? For her, it is all part of one thing. While her literary work has often dominated her creative endeavors, the multi-leveled crossovers between these fields, though often subtle, are implicitly present. Growing up in Middle America with a high-achieving father who was also blind, her drive to do her own thing, to be a writer and an artist, while rejecting all perceived limitations, was almost inevitable. Initially inspired to paint, parental pressure to do something less quote-unquote self-indulgence saw her commence tertiary study in physical therapies before switching over to an English major. And here, Carrie the author was born. Journalism, writing education papers, and teaching writing and art followed before postgraduate studies in sociology and psychology. Yet throughout, her creative expression in both literary and visual forms continued. Now the author of 5 intimately moving books, fiction and nonfiction, in which the constant passage of time is a pivotal context, innumerable articles, short stories, poetry, and social commentaries, with a growing number of awards, her equally emotive visual art has always been nascently entwined with her literary practice, and each is increasingly informed by and reflective of the other. To read more about how writing about her own inevitable past developed into a novel and the artwork she presented in Brisbane, how it became a 27-foot-long hand-dyed and embroidered linen shroud, go to Carrie's website. We've provided a link in the description. So, to recap, in the past 2 episodes, we talked to Carrie about her approach to writing fiction and nonfiction. In this episode, we'll be talking to her about her approach to visual arts. Welcome to the show again, Carrie.
Thank you. This has been great. 3 times. I love it.
Yes, and maybe more in the future.
That would be wonderful.
So the first question is, what is your favorite medium to work with?
You mean with art or
Yes.
writing? So let me just say my favorite thing to do in writing are short stories and essays, although I have a lot of novels published as well. And I think my favorite medium in art changes. Right now, I find that I'm very much drawn to drawing again. And it's been a number of years since I've gone back to that. And I've just taken a lot of pleasure in just drawing. And I think I've been thinking about doing this episode with you and talking about writing and art at the same time. And I think that I went the other day to sketch in the Botanic Gardens in DC and where I live. And I find that I think why I like drawing so much right now is that it's probably the closest to meditation that I come to. It really slows me down, makes me look very carefully at things. I think it's interesting that I am doing this right now because I'm in the middle of a lot of research for my next writing project. So I'm looking at lots and lots of details, which so in so many ways, what I do in art and what I do in writing are very, very connected, even though what I'm drawing has nothing to do with what I'm writing about, but just the process. And I think that for me, the process is between writing and artwork is very much the same. It's observing what's going on. It's digging deeper to find out what's really happening in something. And I think that that's just, in many ways, the nature of artists, all kinds of artists, and also of people. And it makes me very sad when people say to me, "Oh, you're so creative," and I'm not creative at all. And that just isn't true, because everybody is creative in one way or another. So anyway, right now I'm very much drawn to paper and pencil and charcoal and just creating very detailed drawings at the moment.
What are your most popular subjects in art?
Well, for the last couple of years, I have been um, painting and weaving and drawing and working with inks and cut paper and doing birds, dozens and dozens of birds. I've become very fascinated with how colorful they are, how very unique they are. And I think I was originally driven because I live in two places, as you know, but the listeners may not know. I have a home in Oberlin, Ohio, where Oberlin College is, and I have a home in what my husband and I have a home in Washington, D.C. And in Oberlin, we have a small garden, very small garden, a little patio with a small patio garden, and I have bird feeders, and I spend so much money on bird feeders. But I have bird feeders and I watch the birds, and I have all these bird books, and I've collected bird books my whole life, and I have lots of little bird books and big bird books, and I just am very fascinated by birds. And one day I realized I could never remember the names of all the little brown birds. They were all just little brown birds, and which one was a sparrow, which one was a this, which one was a that, which one was a, whatever. And so I kept on going back to these books and trying to figure out, okay, what is the name of this brown bird? What is the name of that brown bird? And then, so I started drawing brown birds, lots of brown birds. And then they became very abstracted birds and colorful and had personalities like characters. So anyway, I've been drawing a lot of birds for the last few years.
Interesting. Yeah. I think, nature is a great source of inspiration. And, I can totally agree with that because, I really like birds as well. Even though I haven't really drawn them in many years, I really do like reading about them and, thinking about them because there's so much variety.
Oh, they're incredible. And they're so beautiful, and they have a grace about them that other animals may not have, but they're very graceful. My husband and I were out the other day. We were having tea in a cafe, sitting outside. It was a beautiful day, and all of a sudden I could see over my husband's shoulder. We're sharing a small dessert, and I saw this bird kind of swoop down over his shoulder and raise its tail up, which I knew meant for that. I knew what that bird was. that's how it landed. And I thought, well, what is it going to do? And it landed on our table and took a chunk out of our dessert and then went on. And yeah, but very gracefully and very boldly. So I think that they're quite fascinating. And maybe they're fascinating because we can't fly and they do it so easily. Um, and they're so beautiful, always.
Mhm. Yes.
They don't have bad hair days like the rest of us do.
I also find the eggs very fascinating.
Oh, aren't they beautiful? Yeah, I have books about eggs and nests also. I have a whole collection of bird books. And yeah, the eggs are beautiful. And why they come out different colors, the greens and the blues it's quite fascinating, I think.
And also, it's interesting how some of the babies look. You have the songbirds and how their babies are like, pink and naked. But then, for waterfowl, such as ducks and geese, they're fluffy.
Right, exactly. Because they have to survive, they have to go in the water. They need that fluff. If they were naked, wouldn't have such a good row of it.
Right. So a second question.
Yes.
Third question, because the second question was the new one I just made up on the spot about your favorite subjects, which was not originally included. But I keep on adding new questions too. And that's just how it works, on my podcast. So my third question is, who are your favorite artists?
I have a lot of favorite artists. I love Mary Cassatt. I love Pierre Bonnard. Most of the Impressionist painters I'm fascinated by, just the freedom that they can sort of move from a concrete subject into an abstraction. And I like, oh, I have, Bert Morisset and Degas. I like the Impressionists quite a bit. I think all the Impressionists, I would have to say.
They have really great color usage.
Beautiful color usage. I mean, bold. They're just so bold. And their paintings feel like they just are so sure, about what they're doing. I also like Caravaggio. I like painters who sort of put their idea, their narrative out there in their paintings and in their drawings with a kind of assurance, like this is what I see and what I think about what I see. And those are the artists I'm drawn to.
Right. I think the Impressionists did a really good job with that because they're not focused on the detail, but on capturing their impression of what they see. So everything is, seen through their lens of color and action and movement. I think movement was very important in the Impressionist paintings.
Right. And, when I have to go back and forth between writing and art because my mind goes back and forth between the two of them. Whenever I talk about writing or in my writing workbook, I talk about, and we talked about the difference between, there's two different kinds of truth, and one of them is a chronological truth. This is, it's a exact record of what's going on, and then the other one is an emotional truth of what the meaning is behind it. What how do people feel about it? What about that event has marked somebody, changed them? And I think that's what the Impressionists caught, was they were looking for the emotional truth, the joy, the sadness, the confusion. I think Jackson Pollock, who we saw a show several years ago of his very, very early works, which you don't see that often in museums, and they were quite representational. Surprising. You would not have necessarily known them to be Jackson Pollock's work. And then you saw the progression where he became more and more abstract. And I think what draws people to Jackson Pollock's work, what most people know of his work, is this sense of, there's an emotional sense to it. There's that draws you in. It looks at first sight that it might be chaotic, but there's a depth to it, an emotional depth to it that is more than just a lot of colors smeared on a canvas, you know.
I think intent's really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Though
Very
I think intent can be hard to detect with something so abstract.
It can, but it's funny. It's like, why do we enjoy looking at certain, why do we look at something and say, well, that's a work of art? And that's a question that I've sort of dealt with in my own writing is what is art, and why is something a work of art? And my book, Ashwin's Rug, is really 9 stories about 9 different people over the course of 100 years who own the same prayer rug and how it changed their lives. And ironically, before I wrote that story, I just did a lot of time thinking about going to museums and looking at art and thinking, why does that piece move me and this piece doesn't? What does this piece say to me that this piece doesn't? And I wound up writing this 50-page sort of philosophical piece about what is the work of art. And the work of art is how it changes people's perception of the world, which is the same work that writing does, that makes you think differently about the world. And after I wrote that 50-page perception, piece about perception and this and that, I threw that out because now I knew how to write the book. And it
Hmm
took me that kind of time to sort of think through, well, art changes lives. And so then I had this rug, and it was easy to go, well, not exactly easy, but it went from person to person, and it changed every person's life in a different way. And I think that's the magic of artwork and also the magic of writing. So,
hmm
the viewer or the reader, a piece of work changes how they see the world.
hmm Well put. So, what are your main sources of inspiration?
Oh my gosh, everything. We were taking a walk today. I took some pictures. I was thinking about, everybody that says, "Oh, I'm not creative. I'm not creative." Everybody's carrying an iPhone with them right now, or some type of phone that is an incredible camera. And we should quit taking selfies, and we should start just walking around and every day find one thing that we think is awesome, or beautiful, and take a picture of it. And that would be the best use of your phone ever. And we were walking and we saw this, my husband and I saw this absolutely immense tree. I mean, it was just one of the biggest trees we've seen in a city. And of course, I took pictures of it because, it was both powerful in its size and kind of awesome in, how, and here it was on a residential street in the middle of Washington, in the middle of Capitol Hill where we live. So we're not talking, it didn't have a big yard. There are no big yards here in Capitol Hill. It had a small yard, and there was a tree that it would have taken easily 3 people to put their arms around it. There was no, that's how big it was. And I'll think about that tree a lot, and I'll write about that tree probably. And with luck, I'll go back and I'll draw that tree because it was so powerful. And I think that ideas come both for artwork and for writing in exactly the same place. Um, I I watch people, I listen to what they have to say, I look at the world, I worry about the world like everybody else does right now, and I think about what can we do to make it different. And I think that shows up both in my artwork and in my writing. I hope that
Hmm
answered the question. I'm not sure it answered your question. I just think that there's so much in the world to think about. And thank goodness that we can get out of our houses now and we can walk around and
Right.
see people and listen to them. And watch them walk down the street. I don't know.
Right. So would you say that art, just like writing is kind of like an extension of life?
Oh, absolutely. It's a narrative. It's a narrative for life. And it tells a story, just like writing tells a story. And I think the best art is one where it does tell a story. Um, yeah, and it doesn't have to be a picture about people. It can be a picture about a big tree or a magnificent sunset, a massive tree that literally filled one yard and reached across the street to the next yard. And I thought, my gosh, if that ever falls. And it was coming out of the sidewalk and onto the road. And I thought, well, that's interesting and beautiful. And I'll go back and I can't wait to see the colors change on it in the fall. It must be just startling to see that tree
Mhm.
have its colors change and then to drop them.
Do you think your art is more focused on nature while your writing is more focused on humans?
I think it's both. I think it's definitely both. Um, when Trevor asked me to be part of this international show, which was quite a thrill to go to Brisbane and to do that. And his when that happens, when an artist gets invited like that to a special show, there is a theme in the show. This one was the inevitable past. And you usually have about a year, 18 months. 18 months is really pretty good. So the artist has time to work through that. And so, what they wanted in the show from the seven of us was to take both of our artistic expressions, whatever they were, and to meld them together. And so I was working, and of course, I live in the United States, and Australia is very far away, and I knew I'd have to take the artwork with me because I didn't want to take the chance of shipping it and having it get lost and not be at the show. And then when Trevor called me and said, and I was thinking about making a series of images. I have a special suitcase where I've had to carry artwork. I use it to carry artwork places. And I can do a 20 by 30. That's 20 inches by 30 inches. That's what I could put in that suitcase, that artwork size. And I was working on a series of pictures about things that were inevitable. And I was trying to think, what in the world is inevitable in my life and this and that and whatever. And then Trevor called and said, we have the schematic done for the show and you have a 30-foot wall. I have a 30-foot wall. So, if you're only doing 20 by 30 pieces and you have a 30-foot wall to fill, that's a lot of little pieces. And I panicked and I said, oh my gosh, Trevor. And he said, do you want a bigger, we can give you a bigger room. And I said, no, I'm fine. Well, I got off the phone and I realized that I had this story that I had never actually wanted to write, didn't know how to write because I didn't have any information. And then I wrote the first page of that story, which turned out later to be a novel. And that was this grandmother that I never knew that died with childbirth with my father. And, in a way, she's haunted me. So that's a person. And, I thought, okay. And I've always wondered what of me is her, what is of me is her. And would you mind if I read that first page so I could talk a little bit about how that artwork grew from
Oh,
there?
please do. That would be great.
Okay, so this is after I got off the phone with Trevor, this is the first thing I wrote. And it was about my grandmother that I had never met and that haunted me in a lot of ways. So I wrote this right after I talked to Trevor. in my 30-foot wall. And it says, I am the grandmother you never knew, the one who vanished, the unsolved crime. I never held your father in my arms, only in my heart, but I was with him every step of his life, as I am with you. I am your blue eyes and your fair skin, a flutter, a thought, a whisper. I use dreams to guide you over the rough spots my life has created for you. My dreams are your dreams. I am part of you. What happened to me the night your father was born has shaped your life. I rest deep in your DNA. I cannot change that. I wish I could. My experience have made you slow to trust. Shadows make your heart race. I know. But the good of me is in you as well. You are strong because I was strong. You fight back. You speak your mind. You have courage and are curious. You are smart like your father. You are the best of me. It is time for you to know who I was and who you are because of all that happened and why I have come to you. I need your help. Now, that's what I wrote. And I sat at my desk and I thought, why did I write that? And oh my gosh, she's speaking from the dead. And then I thought about Laertes um, and his daughter-in-law, who was, within the story of, Jason and blah, blah, blah. And she was why the suitors could not interrupt what she was doing. She was she was embroidering, and it's translated as a tapestry. Well, I knew because I had studied literature that it wasn't a tapestry at all. It was his shroud. And it was the responsibility of daughter-in-laws for Penelope. She had to make the shroud for Laertes, her father-in-law. That was by law. She had to do that. So all of a sudden I realized, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a shroud for my grandmother. And I bought 30 feet of linen that's the kind that's used for a shroud. And I dyed it. And I took each of those words that I just read and I embroidered them on antique handkerchief linen and cut them out. And you know how DNA forms kind of a leaf shape? And the thing that I dyed through this 30 feet of fabric, 27 feet of fabric, actually, because I had to have room for the walls, was a DNA chain, because that was important. That was our connection, was my DNA, her DNA. And then I cut out all the words. Now, let me just stop here for a moment and say, I didn't know how to embroider, but I had this idea, and I had never done a big fabric piece before. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I taught myself how to embroider freehand, how to embroider cursive writing. And so I did it in cursive writing, each of the words individually. And then I had to sew them onto this big shroud. And so what I brought to Brisbane was this 27-foot shroud for my grandmother. And that was my art piece.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. And, it's such a great tribute to her and, all these thoughts you've had. And, I really like how you also took it upon yourself to learn embroidery. I think, sometimes having this kind of goal, to show something at an art show can really push you to learn new mediums that you otherwise might not have, had the motivation to learn.
Absolutely. And, writing is, I've written in lots of different genres. And right now I'm writing a play, and it's fun to learn new things. And I think with artwork, it's like, I am always experimenting and always trying something new. I've begun taking these large drawings I have of birds and cutting them up and then weaving them with handmade Japanese paper that looks like trees and the sky and the earth and whatever symbolically, and weaving the birds, my drawings, into this other that, other paper. So it looks like the bird is flying through a forest, sort of half seen and half unseen. I don't even know why I did that, but it's fascinating. It's become lots of fun to sort of look for paper that's going to give me that impact. And also, and so far the drawings have all been in pencil. And I'm thinking, I could embellish those drawings a little bit more and do in watercolors and this and that, and have the birds floating through this woven sky. So
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting to experiment with multimedia because, the more media you bring into the game, the more complex something could get, and the more engaging it can be, and more experimental, and also kind of explore themes that you can't explore with just one medium.
right, and it changes the narrative. It changes the narrative from a very nice anatomical drawing of a bird to all of a sudden having that bird being cut up and flying through Japanese paper, or handmade paper from some other country, or maybe the next thing I'll do is to do a drawing of a forest or something, and also do a drawing of the bird and cut the two things up and weave those together. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it changes the narrative, and that's really marvelous. I mean, I think that that's really fun.
It is. Finally, in your view, what is the relationship of visual arts and writing?
There, the relationship is that they're storytelling. Um, there's a wonderful, and I think it's Picasso who said this. Um, well, I know he said, that his greatest goal as an artist was to become a child, to think like a child again. And one of the things is that if you see kids drawing, or if you say, I'm going to, draw a bird for me, a child will often say, oh, I'm drawing a bird, I'm drawing a tree, I'm drawing. So they're identifying, they speak out loud what they're going to be drawing. And I find that having that kind of presence of mind of saying, now I'm drawing a chicken, or now I'm drawing a tree, or I'm going to paint the sun coming up. And kids talk to it. And they are, even though they're just drawing a sun and they're drawing a tree, they are speaking a narrative. And I think that really good art, I would like to believe that artists that I love are thinking a narrative in their heads while they're creating the artwork, because I think they're so connected, seeing the world in a different way and wanting to share that. I think it's wanting to share, why would I write a short story and just put it in a drawer and hide it from everybody else? I want to share it. It's like writing my column for Psychology Today. I don't have those insights or those essays just to hear myself do it. I do it because I want somebody else to read it. I want to see what they think about it. I want to have them respond to it. And just like with writing, once I let a story out or a novel out or anything out, it's not mine anymore. It's yours. When you read it, you bring your life to it. And the same thing with a drawing or um, this shroud or whatever, a piece of artwork. Once an artist lets go of it, it's not that artist's anymore. It's going to be interpreted by the person who sees it. And that's a very powerful thing, and in many ways, I think that's really exciting to do something like that, where you're going to have an impact on somebody else's life. You may not ever know what that is, but sometimes people get in touch with you and say, your story really moved me, or I love that piece of artwork. And that's great.
Exactly. So I think both writing and art are a form of discourse with people, in the wider community, even people who are not necessarily quote unquote creative. Once they see it, they have feedback, or it can change their lives in different ways.
Absolutely. And I hope that your listeners think about themselves as creative people and know that there's many ways to create and to be a creative person, whether it's making beautiful cookies or a breakfast that's wonderful, or mastering soups, or arranging flowers, or digging a garden. Those are all creative acts where you are, particularly, notice all of those things are things that you share. If you make cookies, you share them. If you make a garden, you share it. If you serve a beautiful meal, you're sharing it with somebody else. And that's sharing is a creative act. And I think that's, to me, that's really fascinating, that we don't, that we don't that being creative is an opportunity to share with the rest of the world.
Definitely. Well said. Well, thank you so much again for this wonderful
You're welcome.
episode. And, guys, if you want to check out Carrie's art, please read the description. I have included a link to a site where you can see Carrie's art through Marguerite Guitreau's online website and also her Instagram.
Thank you very much. This has been great.
Yep. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.